Hi, Therese Hart's here from Trust in the Chaos. It's the chaos. How you doing? Full disclosure, I tried to shoot this earlier today. Was really happy with how it turned out. And then it didn't save at my computer. And I went into a full-blown shame spiral. And it was real bad. So I'm trying again. Like 8 hours later. But here we are. So this is a video I've been really afraid to make for a long time. And I've alluded to in lots of other videos. And quite honestly, I don't even know if this is for mass consumption as much as it is for me. But I've had Kesha's praying on a loop for 2 days now. And if I don't say something, I'm going to lose it. So here's who I am. I'm finally here to talk about the relationship. Like I said, for those of you who follow Trust in the Chaos, I've talked about, I'll talk about the relationship video. I need to do a video on this relationship. I'm here to do it. And essentially what triggered this video is that I'm back in therapy for the first time in 4 years. Dealing with some shit. There's going to be profanity in this video. Catholics swear. Everyone swears. Get used to it. It's a word. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I've been afraid to talk about for years. For a few reasons. Why I'm afraid. First of which, I'm afraid of the repercussions. I'm still afraid of the people involved in this video. The people who are part of this, even though they haven't been part of my life for years. I'm afraid that they're going to come after me. But I've also hit a point today of screw it. They need to know what they've done. And that isn't even vengeful, but honestly, I just need an apology. That's what I'm here for. Is just stop taking it lying down. The other thing that I need to, or the reason I've been afraid, is that this is going to drug up a lot of really nasty stuff for me. For those of you who follow Trust in the Chaos, you know that this whole thing originally started as a book. And in the process of writing the book, I started getting what I thought were symptoms of PTSD, and I'm now in therapy to rediscover. But as my therapist and I were talking about, a lot of my depression anxiety was triggered later in life. A lot of times people with depression anxiety can root it back to when they were young. For me, I can't. And I think I figured out the event. That's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about the fact that a lot of the depression that I went through and the anxiety that I still suffer from comes from my lack of control of an event that I took part of for 6 years. And that's not okay. And I'm here to admit my own stupid pride in it, because I was not blameless. But it really screwed with me, and still screws with me, in my emotional life, in my mental life, in my spiritual life. And that's why we're here, right? To talk about all this crap. So here we go. I had a high school relationship that has changed the course of my life forever. That being said, I'm married to the man I know God put in my life. Matt is the most incredible man I could have ever wished for. He is extremely understanding and compassionate and funny and just gets it. And I know God put him in my life for a reason. In no way is this me wishing I had a different life than I do now. Honestly, the more I think back on this whole relationship, I think it's so dumb that I'm so upset, because I know how much worse my life would be if I had been with this person. I'm not going to name drop. That's not fair to that person, nor his significant other. But I also am reclaiming my narrative. So here's the story, team. In high school, I dated a gentleman for 2 years. Now, before we started dating, I had known him through a friend. And I was looking for a date to the sophomore turnabout dance. And I was like, I don't know who to ask. And my friend at the time was like, oh my gosh, you should ask this guy. He's super religious. And I was really claiming my faith at that time. And I was like, cool, why not? And we had family friends. I went to kindergarten with his cousin. Our parents were political friends. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So he agreed, and he wanted to date way sooner than I did, and I eventually held him off for about 5 months, um, and eventually dated him in July of 2009. Um, the first 2 years of our relationship, the main two, I have forgiven him for, because I think we were just two dumb young kids trying to figure out what life and love is. During those 2 years, and he was very honest from the get go, that he said he was either going to become a priest or get married. Things very quickly escalated to about 6 months in. For my birthday, he gave me a promise ring in which he said, I'm either marrying you or becoming a priest. Like, those are my two. And, well, I know that it was him being upfront. That put a lot of pressure on me, whether or not he meant it. And a lot of my Catholic guilt of this gentleman, am I really about to take him away from God when we are in such need of priests in the Catholic faith? Or is this my vocation? And then it led to this downward spiral of, not only is this my vocation I'm potentially screwing with, I'm potentially screwing with his. And I feel as though if we screw this up, neither of us are going to be happy. And I don't want a life in which we've screwed this up and we hate ourselves. So there was a lot of pressure. But I'd say for about the first year and a half of our relationship, we were pretty rock solid. There was still that moment of, are you going to be priests, or are we like staying together? But for the most part, it was good. It was a really solid relationship. The last 6 to 8 months is where things got real weird. He had decided not to go to seminary right after high school and decided to go to school. Now, the main school he was looking at was University of Minnesota. I was looking at University of Illinois, and I was like, oh my gosh, our schools are like competitors. We can go to each other's games and visit. And he's like, we're breaking up for college. And I said, excuse you? His logic was, if we're meant to be, we'll go to college and we'll come back to each other. Which, I guess, makes sense. And I took that really hard. And on that day in November, I made him promise, we're in no rush. Let's finish our senior year together. I love you. I want to be with you. See what happens. And can we at least make it to our 2-year anniversary? He was like, yeah, totally. The closer and closer we got to our relationship ending, us going off to college, so the harder it got. In addition to dealing with the emotional agita of graduating high school, moving away, going to a school with nobody, I, as a singer, had gotten vocal fold surgery where I couldn't talk or sing for a long time, which, as anyone can imagine, not talking for 6 weeks is really hard, but as a vocalist, it's even worse. Fast forward to about 2-3 weeks after surgery. It's our 2-year anniversary, so I can talk a little bit. I'm like, we're having some communication, but a lot of it is me through a whiteboard and me through text or nonverbal cues. And he was really cool about it. But he takes me to the park bench where we had made our relationship official 2 years previously and gives me back a box of every note I'd ever written him and dumps me square on the spot. He later told me he wishes he would have dumped me around prom, which that sucks. And not only does it suck not being able to talk fully or sing fully your emotions out, it was about 2 weeks before we went off to school, 2 or 3 weeks. And I had to go to a family wedding. And my entire family shipped us so hard. Like, for my 18th birthday, my mom framed the caricature from us from prom. The whole family shipped us. And I had to go to a family wedding the next day. Everyone's like, oh my god, how are you and your boyfriend? How's college gonna work? And I'm like, yeah, he dumped me yesterday. And it was awful. It was really awful. Fast forward about the week before we all left. We decided to hang out one more time. And it ends up with making out in the back of my mom's car. Which obviously is very confusing mixed signals. I go off to school at Valparaiso University. He ends up at University of Nebraska. So nowhere where we originally intended. But I think it's honestly for the best for both of us. And I had a really hard time my freshman year of college. If you watched the suicide video I posted last week, I almost committed suicide that year, and this whole story is a huge part why. Um, I had a really hard time finding friends, and the friends I thought I had bullied me and made my life a living hell. Um, and I'm still afraid to admit it for fear that they're going to come after me. But here we are. While they were in the midst of being my friend and not being my friend, I had another relationship where someone was deciding to be my friend and not be my friend, and that was this high school relationship. We decided after we broke up that we were going to try to be friends, because we were each other's best friends for 2 years. And that's a really tough thing to kind of can. Now, a lot of people try this when they get out of a relationship, and I should have been smart enough to at least put some time in, but I was dumb and young, so what are you going to do? So about beginning of college till about September, so a solid month, we talked pretty regularly. Maybe not every day, but quite a bit. And then about September, this individual said, we can't talk anymore. God says we can't talk anymore. I have to discern. Which is a pretty healthy, life choice. I get that. Where it starts getting crazy is the back and forth. So November hops up right before Thanksgiving. I'm in the middle of a music theory midterm. And this individual's like, God says we can talk again. Which, God saying you can and cannot talk to people in your life is a load of crap. That's you being selfish and blaming it on God, which is something that I've really had to come to terms with. And a large problem with this whole relationship and my spirituality is that I felt very spiritually manipulated. I also felt very spiritually manipulated by this relationship, and something I've forgiven this individual for, because during high school, and I think this is something that he carried with him, is he had a spiritual director who was no longer a Catholic priest, who would say things like, you should give up your girlfriend for Lent, for discernment, which is also not okay. So I think he was also dealing with some of the backlash of that. So around Thanksgiving, we could talk again, and we were good up until about Valentine's Day. And whenever we'd Skype, which would be about once a month, we'd talk a lot about stuff, and he's always the first one to bring up our relationship. I tried not to. I tried to keep it in friend zone. I didn't want to trudge on him and his spirituality and his discernment. He's always the one who brought us up dating. Around after Valentine's Day, he's like, God says we can't talk again. And this is where things start to get shady. So we don't talk again until about end of April, early May. At this point, he's decided he's going to seminary. He's going to drop out of school, go to seminary, become a priest. God bless him. But he starts saying all this stuff like, I miss you. And it sounds very datey. We end up coming back from our freshman year, and he's like, let's go out. And I assumed it was just like a friend's thing. But I was like, I'll drive to your house. It's totally cool. That way, you don't have to pick me up or whatever. So I ended up driving, and we go to his house. I was very close with his parents. We end up chatting with his parents. He's like, so what is today? What is this? And I'm like, oh, no, we're just friends. We're just catching up. And his parents are like, right. Which should have been flag number one, that his parents weren't hiding the fact that this was a date. But it wasn't, because I'm an idiot. And I blame myself for a lot of this. We end up going out. He pays for everything. Dinner, midi golf. We end up going back to my house. We're college students. We're drinking, of course we are. We're watching How I Met Your Mother, having a drink. And we start making out. And he asked me to have sex with him. And this is the part of the story that I'm afraid I'm going to get nailed for, but whatever. And I say, absolutely not. I love you, and I miss you. But if you're going into seminary, you're going in as a virgin. I'm not being your, experiment. We're not doing this. I then had to drive him home because we were at my house, and my house is about 15, 20 minutes from his. He didn't talk to me the entire car ride home. We ended up hanging out about a week later, and that's when he's like, we gotta stop this. We can't do this anymore. We can't talk. I gotta block you on all social media, which is probably what we should have done from the first place. But the reason why he was doing it is because I didn't give it up. That was about a day before I left on a Germany trip. Now, for those of you who watched last week's suicide video, this trip is very important because I almost committed suicide on this trip. Not only during the course of this in and out with this former love of mine, I had really crappy friends who teared me down and did not build me up. And I tried to tell, like, I think something's wrong with me mentally. I think I have depression. And they just kind of blew it off and continued to make my life a living hell and call me that crazy one. So they blew me off on this trip. I had just gotten dumped for real by the love of my life and what I thought was my best friend, and there was no end in sight, and I almost committed suicide. That's just the way it was. Things were so bad, in addition to this relationship ending, not having friends. I almost didn't go back to Valpo. I ended up calling Res Life and was like, listen up, you will transfer me out of this room with my supposed friend, or I'm not coming back. And they transferred me, thank God. And I ended up going back, and I had a really rough time transitioning back into, like, finding some sort of a friend group. I dated this guy again, and I made the same mistake I did originally, trying to fill this hole of depression that I knew I had, but didn't want to get diagnosed for with a relationship, which is exactly what I did with the first guy. And he ends up dumping me, and I go through a really bad phase where I become a pseudo-alcoholic for a minute. And it was ugly. And that's when I went into therapy for the first time and really started to address my depression and my anxiety. I eventually started to level out a little bit, and I remember praying to God for the 40 millionth time in those 2 years between him dumping me for good and what would change my life forever in a different, much better way. I would go to God all the time, and I was so angry because how could God play this emotional tug of war with me? How could he put this man in my life and then yet come away? And it really screwed my spirituality. And I reached out to my spiritual director, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, go pray, go give it up to God. And I'm like, what do you think I've been doing for 2 years, Father? Like, no. He said, just go do it again. And I did. And I ended up going to adoration on a Monday and just laying it all out on the line, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. Suddenly, I stopped having the PTSD nightmares that I was having multiple times a week about this past relationship. I stopped having the flashbacks. I stopped feeling as much guilt. There was still a lot there, but a lot of the weight had been lifted. Because if I'm being perfectly honest with myself, I probably had PTSD from the emotional tug of war that this guy put me through. Saturday night, so 5 days after that weightlifting during adoration, I go to this frat party that I did not want to go to. And this guy who sits in the back of my ed class for 3 hours every Thursday night going, opens the door, and I'm like, oh, they sent you. I end up marrying that guy, spoiler alert. But that night I laid it all out on the line. We ended up talking for 5 hours that night. And I was like, look, here's my past relationships. Here's my religious views. I've been screwed in the past. If you want to date me, if we're going to do this, I have depression and anxiety. Here's my baggage. If you don't want to deal with it, that's cool. This is your get out of jail free card. No hard feelings. But if you want to date me, this is also what you're dating. And for some reason, that guy went with it. And we've been together 6 years, married for 2, going on 3. I wish I could tell you that's the end of the story with the first gentleman in my life. But this is the part where I really have a hard time forgiving. In addition to the freshman year of emotional tug of war and using me as a bargaining chip. That's what he did. I find out end of junior year going into senior. I've been with Matt for 6 months. That the first individual has dropped out of seminary, and he always said, if I end up discerning out and we go to college and we're meant to be together, like, I'm coming back for you. So when I immediately heard this, I panicked. I didn't have his phone number anymore. I grabbed my mom's phone and I text him and say, we are never, ever, ever getting back together. And he's like, yeah, cool. I didn't want to either. And I'm like, great, glad we talked. And that was it. Or so I thought. Fast forward about 6 months. 6 months. It's released that we're going on our annual spring break tour with my college choir, and we're performing at University of Nebraska. Now, if you remember from, 15 minutes ago, he ended up at University of Nebraska after he dropped out of seminary where he first went. His mom and I, who I thought was cool, who also shipped us very hard, but I had a decent relationship with, so I thought, I texted her and was like, hey, we're going to University of Nebraska. If Kenny asks about it, if he asks about it, please, please, please ask him not to go. And she was like, yeah, cool, it's totally fine. I get a text the day of. We're literally on the bus. Hey, can I come to your concert tonight? And I start freaking panicking, losing my dang mind. I immediately go into shock. And I start devising this plan. Now, Matt and I had pretty much committed ourselves at this point. I had a promise ring. We weren't officially engaged, but like we knew we were right for each other. We'd been dating about a year and a half-ish. At that point, it was it. We weren't going to be with anyone else. I went to my college conductor, who had known the whole saga, because I ended up telling him eventually about my suicide attempt. And I said, because we had a firm policy if you can't wear jewelry, especially rings, for the uniformity of the uniform. And I said, please, 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 can I wear my ring and say I'm engaged? Please, will you go along with this? And he said, absolutely. The whole choir bought into it. Like, I made an announcement over the bus and was like, y'all, we're doing this. And everyone was on board. And it's insane when your choir has to get involved. So anyways, we end up going to this performance. We end up talking afterwards. I think it's just friendly. Like, I've laid the boundary of like, no, son, no. We end up texting that night, and he's like, sneak out, come out with me. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how homestays work. It's great, it's fine. Fast forward about a month. Something happened in my theology class that kind of reminded me of something, and I thought we were cool and trying to be friends or whatever. Lies and slander. We're talking, everything's normal, and he's like, so tell me about this fiance of yours. I was like, okay, weird, but okay. So I write out this ginormous text about how excellent Matthew is and how much I love him, how great he is, to which this gentleman responds with, that's great, but I can see the jealousy in him. To which I literally responded, sorry, think I had an aneurysm. What did you say? To which he responds with, because of our past, but I really just miss you as a friend. Okay, whatever, bro. Fine. We ended up not talking again ever since then. Well, that's not necessarily true. We blocked each other. He blocked me more on everything. I think I deleted his number after that conversation. But he blocked me on social media, every platform. About a month after that, he started dating his now wife, and they seem really happy together, so God bless him. But I can't deny what he did, and now that's really screwed with me. From a spiritual standpoint, which is, one of the primary goals of this channel, is that it really made me doubt God's role in my life, and it really made me question how God discerns, especially with me personally. It led to PTSD, which in the process of writing this book, it all came back. Writing in such descriptive detail, it all came back. And that's why I decided to start therapy. And I think the more I'm thinking about it, my lack of control in this whole situation and my need for something to stay solid really led to my anxiety. Because my anxiety is pretty much rooted in this need to control things, or fear of deadline, or feel of failure, or feel of screwing up. And that all goes back to this situation. I'm trying not to come off like the crazy ex. I don't want to ever be that. And I don't think I'm trying to be. I think I'm just trying to reclaim what I tried to write off for such a long time. I think that I'm starting to address what happened and how that has profoundly changed my life forever. And I pray to God, as I've been listening to Kesha all day, I hope he finds his peace falling on his knees praying and that he's changed. And I pray that I can do the same. But until I address this and the effect it's had on my life, I can't fully move forward in peace. I'm not in love with him. That died a long time ago. And I'm beyond grateful for the gentleman that God put in my life. That is the best. And I couldn't do any of this without him, or his understanding, or his compassion. And I'm so grateful that he's not threatened by any of this, because he knows that we're solid. But in order for me to be okay and to start being able to cope with a lot of the daily ways that this has affected me, I'm not going to be the fullest person God's meant me to be. So here's the beginning of a journey back to therapy, probably up in my meds again, but addressing what has been put in front of me and how that has affected me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Pray for me, y'all. This is going to do some weird stuff to me in my marriage and probably my teaching and this channel, and it's going to be a ride. But I pray that y'all, are praying for me and my sanity throughout the trip. From Trusting the Chaos, I'm Trees Hearts. Let's take this trip together, y'all.